What I've done here is I've made two buttons and I've made two LEDs. I'm going to go ahead and change the color of this one for now. We'll do blue. So it's the same setup, just twice as many LEDs, twice as many buttons. So now I want to go into the code, and first I want to clean it up a little bit. This was our code before. We didn't use any variables, so I'm going to go ahead and add some variables for now. The first thing would be, I have two LEDs. Since they're plugged into digital pins, and they're going to be between 2 and 13 possible values, I'm going to use byte. And to be a little bit better, I'm going to do constant, a constant byte. And I have one that's red and one that's blue. I could call them LED R, LED 1, something. I think I'm just going to do LED R for now. And that one is plugged into 13. Now you notice I'm not writing comments in. I'm discussing things for now. I would like you to write comments in. Maybe I'll add a few here in a little bit. We'll see. I do want to just keep these relatively quick though. Alright, and then I have two buttons, and these buttons are plugged into pins. Let's see if I can pull this a little closer. Not while I'm editing. Oh, there we go. This button here is plugged into 2. I'll just call this button 1. And the other one I'll call button 2. So I'm cleaning things up a little bit. Now these are global again because I'm going to have to set them up here as either inputs or outputs, and I want to use them in here. Since I'm using them in multiple scopes, they need to be outside both those scopes. I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to replace these numbers with the names. So this is button 1, and it's an input. That's my button. And since I have two of them, I'm going to do my other one here. I'm going to set it up exactly the same way, except for it's button 2 instead of button 1. But other than that, it's exactly the same. Alright, now I'm going to do my pin modes for my LEDs. I'm just going to change that 13 to LED R because that's what 13 is. And I'm going to put one more in for LED B. Alright, hopefully all is well and I spelled everything correctly. So I'm starting to clean it up a little bit, and obviously you can see that there's more code in here, but it should make it run more efficiently and more easy to edit if I need to later. Since I have two buttons here, now I'm in the loop. Again, I'm using a Boolean here because this is going to check to see whether my button's pushed, and it either is or it isn't. There's two possible states there. That means a Boolean would work best. But I have two buttons here, and the one plugged into 2 is button 1. So first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to change this name. Button 1. But you'll see that I made this new spot here to save data. This one's button state, this one's button 1. I know that I'm going to have to do it a second time, so I should have something similar so that I know that when I press button 1, it's saved to that specific spot, not when I press button 2. So just to make things easy, I'm going to call this button state 1. And I'm just going to do the exact same thing on the next line. And this is one I like to copy and paste. You have to be a little bit careful when you do this. You just have to make sure that you change all the little things that need to be changed. It's very similar, except for the variable names here. So I just have to make sure I change both of those. Now, one thing I don't want to do is I don't want to write constant in here, because what's going to happen is I want to be able to check the button, and if I say that it's constant, it'll lock that value in. And I don't want to lock that value in. I want it to be able to change depending on whether that button's pressed or not. Alright, so I'm not exactly sure what I want to do here yet. but I do know that it's not going to quite work yet, because if I were to run this, and I know I haven't done a whole lot on errors yet, let's see what happens if I try to run this right now. So you'll see here that it says in function void loop, so it's kind of telling me where I'm looking. It tells me on what lines, 22 and 27, and it even gives me how many characters in, 6 characters in. So if I start here, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, this right here, that's where my problem is, and it says that button state was not declared in this scope. This is the scope of the void loop, and it says that it doesn't understand it, it doesn't know what I'm talking about. And the reason for it is because button state has not been declared globally, right? But it also hasn't been declared locally, because this is button state 1, not just button state. So anytime you see a code saying something wasn't declared in this scope, there's a few things that could happen. One of those is I'm using a variable that it doesn't recognize because I haven't declared it yet. Another one could be that it is in the wrong scope, or that I don't have matching opening and closing of my scopes. My curly brackets aren't quite right. So I'm just going to go ahead and put a 1 in for now. I'm going to go ahead and try to start the simulation again. And see, now it's working. I still want to finish some stuff up here. That was just something that I thought we'd go over, was some error messages. This one's 13, so this is LED R. And this one's going to be LED B. Now you'll see that I'm still just using one button here. Start the simulation. Let's see. I'm not seeing anything change, so I'm not sure what's going on yet. But I do know that I haven't quite finished up what I want to do yet, so why don't we just keep moving on, and then we'll figure out what's going on. I think what's happening is, well, we'll just add a couple more things, because the main thing I wanted to do here is I actually wanted to get into some what I call complex logic. I want to get into what happens if two things happen at once. And I won't necessarily be able to show this very well because I only have one mouse. I can only click two things, or one thing at a time. But let's say that I want my red LED to turn on when button state 1 is low and the other one is high. So I have two things that I want to have true in here. To show that two things are true, what I'm going to do is I'm going to use the and sign. And all I'm going to do is I'm going to write this exactly. This chunk right here looks just like it would if it was standing alone. Just like this looks just like this if it were standing alone. But I put two things in here to link them together. I use the two and signs. And what this means is check this, and then check to see if both are true. And if both are true, it will come in here. So this is what we call an and right here. This and this are true. Makes the whole thing true, means it will go into our if statement. I can do the same thing down here, but let's this time say if this is true or the other thing's true. So the other thing being true, let's say that we want button state 2 to equal high. Now again, I don't know if this can do a whole lot, but if I say if either button state 1 is high or button state 2 is high, I want it to enter this scope. The way I make it say if it is or is I do the double vertical line. Now the double vertical line we're probably not as familiar with. On most keyboards it's going to be shift backslash, and that is above the enter key. So I put 2 of those in, and this is going to now be an OR statement. If this one is true or this one is true, then it will enter into here. So this is our complex logic, getting into ands and ors. And then the last thing we could do is, why don't we talk about a not. If button state 2 is not equal to, and I have to double check. To be honest, I forget sometimes the order of this, and you might as well. So anytime you can't remember anything, you just go and you double check. So I'm going to go to the cheat sheet here, and here is our not sign. See how it says not? And here is not equal to. So I can put the not in front of other things as well, but it's most commonly going to be in front of the equal sign, so not equal to. And an easy way to remember this would be, it's the way that you say it. You don't say equal to not, you say not equal to. So if it's not equal to low, then I want you to do this. So the only way it's going to enter this scope is if button state 2 is not equal to low. In other words, if button state 2 is high. It's just another way to write it, and sometimes it's just as easily to write it the other way, but sometimes writing it this way will cause it to work a little bit more efficiently, or it'll give you slightly different results depending on the setup or other things that are going on in your circuit or your program. So that would be an introduction to cleaning this up, making sure that it looks a little bit better with variables, using multiple LEDs. I know that we didn't necessarily use them down here, but showing you how to declare multiple variables for LEDs or buttons, how to set up multiple buttons or LEDs, how to check multiple buttons, and again, if I wanted to have both of them turn on, digital right, LED B high. So if I wanted to use multiple LEDs, I just put one after the other. Then we have our logic where we can do compound logic here. We have check multiple things inside of this if statement to see if they're true. We have our and. We have our or, and we have our not equal to.